this is almost a roll of a dice. And it's become inevitable. This has been inevitable since Nigel Farage turned up in Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars and some poor soul wielding a camera phone, filming people risking their lives to get to the United Kingdom, rubbing his thighs with a sort of unholy glee at the thought of not so much the human peril, but the fact that he'd be able to get his desiccated fizzog back on the telly by inviting people once again to hate on foreigners with impunity. It became inevitable because the Tory party, as is evinced by people like 30p Lee and Jonathan Gullis, has recast itself very much in the mould of Nigel Farage. And there are still people in the Tory party in Parliament and beyond who are just as disgusted and dismayed by that fact as I am and as you are, but they're not currently able to say so in public. They have to stand foursquare behind Suella Braverman, who has dreams about deporting people to Rwanda and suggests on the front page of one newspaper today that if you're not desperate to see refugees treated like scum, then you're somehow unpatriotic. So you know what is happening here, but I don't think that it is a plan to actually fix a problem. I don't think that, well, I don't know. And as ever, when I'm in the position of not knowing something, I have this wonderful privilege of being able to ask you to explain it to me, or at least to tell me what you think is going on. I don't think it's doable in the way that they're describing it. They talk about pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights. That's one of Churchill's most abiding and beautiful legacies. The idea that we would become, I think it's only Belarus and Russia in what might be geographically termed Europe that doesn't abide by the European Convention on Human Rights. Owning the libs by copying Vladimir Putin seems like a reach too far even for these clowns. But hey-ho, how many times have I said to you that would probably be a step too far even for these ghouls and clowns, only to find them taking that very step the very next day. So they've got the front pages that they wanted. Let me run you through them in case you've missed them. And again, I'd remind you, this does matter regardless of how tempting it is to point out that the public routinely explain they're a lot more concerned about the cost of living or the National Health Service or possibly about immigration in general, but not small boats in particular. In fact, the less coverage there is, you can watch the graph go up and down. The ramping up of racist rhetoric in the run-up to the Brexit referendum was off the absolute charts, and everybody was obsessed about immigration. The numbers now are roughly the same as they were before, if not slightly higher. But it's people coming from other parts of the world. It's people coming from from India and other parts of Asia that are ramping up our figures. So the numbers are exactly the same, but you're just not cross about it anymore because it's not in the Daily Mail and the Sun every day. Well, it is today. Front page of the Times. PM plans annual cap on number of refugees. Front page of the Mail. We will push human rights law to limit. Front page of the Telegraph. Braverman vows to stop the boats with laws challenging European judges on migrants. The Guardian doesn't do it. Fair play to them, nor does the Mirror. They go after the peerage for the knighthood for Boris Johnson's dad. The Sun has a no entry sign. No entry. Small boat migrants banned from today. The Daily Express, as is its wont these days, goes even lower than everybody else. Suella, back law to stop boats or betray Britain. And the Eye, which is fast becoming my sort of favourite newspaper in terms of being informed. Sunak plan to stop channel migrants may be unworkable. Tories warn him. So they must know that most of this can't work. It's not going to do the things that they say that they want it to do. So that leads me to my first question of the day. What's the real plan? And I think the answer to that is this. And this is the bit I don't get. Okay. The reason I don't get it is because it looks like it looks so silly that you can't believe it would succeed. So imagine you've been in charge of something for 13 years, right? And you create a massive problem, right? Either by design or by accident. We don't have to say for sure that it was deliberate. It could have been accidental. So you've been in charge for 13 years. you have created a massive problem. Your policies have created a massive problem, okay? Coming out of the Dublin Convention, rejecting the Dubs Amendment in the House of Lords. You can look this stuff up. Closing down safe routes, effectively. Closing down safe and legal routes. I read this morning that 22 Afghans have come here through the scheme that the government keep boasting about. So it's like getting a camel through the eye of the needle, getting into this country as a genuine refugee. And the people who do get here almost always have their applications accepted. So that's a problem the government can't admit because, well, unfortunately, their base, cast in the mould of UKIP, they don't want anybody coming here. They can't really tell you why. They're just frightened and angry all the time. And that is the constituency that the Conservative government is now shackled to, handcuffed to. It can't escape from it. Okay? They are stuck with people who are frightened and angry all the time. The challenge that the Conservatives face is trying to define what it is that they're frightened and angry about. So rather than being frightened and angry about the cost of living crisis, the state of the NHS, the state of schools, the cost of energy, the environment, the rivers, whatever it might be, the food shortages, we've got to get them frightened and angry about migrants. Instead of trying to make them less frightened and less angry in general, they're just trying to direct the fear and the fury towards this hardy perennial of often racist rhetoric. So you've been in charge for 13 years. You've created a massive problem. You can't solve it to the satisfaction of the people that you're shackled to. You can solve the problem, but that would involve us doing our bit internationally and plenty of people being able to come here legally and safely and applications being assessed before people have to risk their lives in boats and people being accepted into the country on a sort of scale that would be internationally viable. They can't really do that because the people that they're handcuffed to, who are furious and angry about foreigners in general, but can just about get away with saying what they really feel when it's confined to people in small boats. They've been successfully dehumanised since Farage turned up in Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars. They've been sufficiently dehumanised for people to protest outside the holding centres where they are sleeping with, vicious, hateful, even some Nazi placards. That's how dehumanised they've been. People can do that in the United Kingdom, in Brexit Britain, in 2023 with relative impunity. You can have a Conservative MP saying that he shares the concerns of people turning up outside these facilities. But they can't fix it. So what is the plan now? Is it simply to draw attention to the problem, scapegoat the law, in this case European Convention on Human Rights, and, quotes, lefty lawyers, which they've been warned about doing by the police after attacks upon immigration lawyers, but they don't care about that. They ignore that. So the plan is to keep the fire burning, to turn up with fake fire extinguishers, and then use the fact that they can't put the fire out to attack, in no particular order, the European Convention on Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights, which has nothing to do with the European Union. That's the European Court of Justice. Again, something that a lot of them don't seem to understand, never mind care about. And finally, lefty lawyers and the Labour Party. Is that the plan? So they don't have a hope in hell of putting the fire out. And deep down, they don't really want to, because if they put the fire out, what are they going to use to distract everybody from the state of the NHS, the consequences of Brexit, the cost of living, the state of schools, the sewage in our rivers, and on and on and on and on. So they need the fire to be burning. They need to cast themselves as the people to put the fire out. They need to fail to put the fire out. And they need to use that failure to put the fire out to blame the fire on lefty lawyers, the Labour Party, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the European, it could be the UN Convention on Refugees as well. So, number one, is that the plan? I think I am about 80% sure it is, by the way, but I'm open, as always, to correction. And number two, and this is the bit where you come in, will it work this time? Will it work this time? They used it to get Brexit over the line, and look where that got us. The numbers are relatively negligible. of course, in the greater context, never mind the global context, even in the national context. You take every town and village in the country, and I think you'd get one person each if they were to divvy it up in that way. Is it going to work this time? The government are desperate for you to be, or for your mother-in-law or your Uncle Keith, to be furious and angry about people in small boats, and they're going to use that fury and anger to direct rage towards lawyers, the Labour Party, the European Convention on Human... Well, let's just call it Winston Churchill's legacy. I think it will work because I've sat here now for nearly 20 years watching it unfold like clockwork, watching night follow day. Up pops a demagogue like Farage or Little Tommy Ten Names, and then 2 years later you can set your clock by it. You've got the government aping the same ideas and the same opinions in pursuit of that weird vote, the vote of people who are constantly frightened and angry and have been persuaded that the best repository or the best target for their fury and their fear is either foreigners in general or, even more helpfully, refugees in particular, because they're so visible in their little boats, which takes us back to Farage and his Fisher-Price binoculars.